Hello, I'm Josh Cantwell, Chief Executive Officer at Grand Mental Health. Welcome to We Don't Talk About That, a podcast committed to honest, direct conversations about mental health. In each episode, we talk openly about the many different challenges that face our communities and those we serve. Together, our team and special guests explore new ways to approach mental health from progressive thinking to mindful treatment. Here's to open minds and open dialogue. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Lobetz, and welcome to We Don't Talk About That, the show where we lean into the tough conversations most people avoid. Thank you for joining us for part 2 in a conversation with Dr. Timko about affairs. So now let's kind of shift over to talking about the path to healing. Can trust ever really be rebuilt after an affair? What does that process look like in real life?
Trust can be rebuilt. It can never be the blind, naive trust that you had before. Before an affair, for most couples, they might deal with some insecurity, but it's like your partner goes into a blind spot where they are granted trust in a pretty comprehensive way. And after an affair, you can't trust them the same way. Trust isn't rebuilt that way. And even when you get years out from an affair, it often just looks different. Now, there is a honesty about the trust that is rebuilt because it doesn't have that blind, naive aspect to it. The reality is that our partners could hurt us this way at any given time. They have to choose not to. We have to look for what's really there. And when something doesn't feel right, we need to say, hey, this doesn't feel right. Let's talk about what's just happened and why that doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
The process of rebuilding, the process that I take couples through is, number one, we've got to establish very clear boundaries around this relationship. And usually there's a set of boundaries that are established immediately after discovery that may or may not be the boundaries that would be there in a year. And some of those boundaries might feel very uncomfortable because they're not the way that they have interacted up until then. And those boundaries are much better when they're boundaries for both partners. So instead of you can't spend time with someone of the opposite sex, is we don't spend time with members of the opposite sex unless our partner knows where we are and there's some understanding or some knowledge that the other partner has. Now, usually the betrayed partner is okay with this because they're like, I don't care if you look at my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing to hide.
Right.
I've never had anything to hide. You can
Mm-hmm.
look at my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So having it be an even or an equal boundary then brings the partner who had the affair into the openness, but doesn't feel like it as much like it's a punishment. Because you're not trying to punish, you're trying to get good boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And there's no timeline, right, for rebuilding trust and establishing trust. I've heard, particularly from someone who may have stepped outside of their relationship, say, I'm tired of talking about this. I'm tired of being tracked. I'm tired of always, going back to what happened, and I'm ready to move on. How do you respond to that? Because I do think that could be kind of difficult in terms of, haven't we been talking about this for over a year now? Can you please move on? Like, how do you respond to that?
How long it takes depends on how deep the violation was, how long it happened, and some element of if you had an affair with your partner's best friend, that is going to be worse than if you had an affair with a stranger. So there's some complicated elements of making it harder to recover from. All of those factor in. There's also some personality differences. Going to have more empathy for the person who had an affair, and some people are just going to have a harder time putting themselves in their shoes and forgiving. So that timeline really depends on the couple and what happened. The person who had the affair is always going to be ready to move on faster. They had longer to process what happened. They knew all the details from the beginning. It helps for the partner who had an affair to think about, like, when did your partner actually know all of the information? That's really the point where you start to rebuild trust. And partners who have affairs, that's complicated for them. They don't want to necessarily disclose everything because they don't want to hurt their partner more. They may have some feelings about the person they had the affair with. Those are human feelings. Maybe they have no place in the relationship, but they still may exist. So they may not want their partner to know their name and address and phone number and social media, and might be afraid that they might go over to their house and blow up their life.
It'd be all bad.
Sometimes that disclosure gets dragged out. But if you really want to get over an affair, what you would do is you would talk about it every day for a little while until it gets to the point where you can talk about it without it blowing everything up. When I say that to people, they're like, well, no, we don't want to do that. Right? But that's how you get to closure. I know a couple's at closure when the affair can come up and it doesn't derail everything. Not a comfortable conversation, but like, okay, this happened. This impacted us. We've worked through it. We repaired it, and we got to solid ground. So now we can talk about it. So now we can say, yes, this happened.
That is really, really good. A good indication of healing and the work actually working, doing the work actually working, is when you can have the conversation and still have dinner together, perhaps, or still, and have a healthy conversation about other things. So how do you help a betrayed partner cope with recurring images or intrusive thoughts about the affair? Because to your point earlier, they may know some things. In the things they don't know, then they start imagining. How do you help that person cope with recovering through a challenge?
I had a conversation just recently, and I told the person who broke the boundaries in the relationship, they have the choice. Because with their partner, they have the choice of either having them know what happened or living with their imagination. Those are the two choices. There's not a third. And they have to choose, do you want the repercussions of them knowing specifically what happened and with who and how often? Or do you want them making that up in their head where they fill in the gaps and this person knows their partner? They know what their imagination is like. And so they weren't ready to make that decision at that moment. But I think that's a really good question.
Yes.
Knowing every detail may make them ruminate on it. They might have intrusive thoughts. It gets stuck in their head, plays like a reel. They have a hard time interrupting it. Not knowing, they make up stuff and then they do the same stuff. So you want to disclose enough stuff so that they can make sense of it and heal, but you don't want so much that it's almost a PTSD response. So for the person who's having that, they are going to be thinking about this all the time.
Yeah.
This is going to be months out and they're still going to be thinking about it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Normalizing that this really is a PTSD experience. The flashbacks and the hypervigilance and the distrust of self, all of those things. These are kind of a traumatic reaction.
Yeah.
And then helping them see how the openness and transparency of the boundaries that we set start to give them that reassurance. But it is normal. They're going to ask the same question 100 times.
100 times, because the more you think about it, the more you might have other questions and thoughts. But I think I would choose to know every detail.
Yeah.
So that I'm not left with my imagination. And oftentimes we may dream or assume the worst, if we don't have the clarity around what actually happened. maybe, and I'm not in the mental health profession, but maybe the brain goes to the extreme or maybe worse than what actually did happen. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that that explanation. And I've got a couple of other questions, especially the one around telling people. So if couples choose to stay, which it sounds like most do, how should they handle telling other people that they chose to stay together, like friends and family, especially if those folks knew what happened? How should couples share that they've gotten through that incident, that experience, and they're staying together?
The recovery process has to be a joint process. So every piece of recovery, they both need to be partners in. This is just one more aspect where they have to join together as partners and figure out what they're going to do. How they deal with family members and close friends can often be the most problematic, particularly if they know a lot of the details. So, that united front, making it clear that you have made a conscious decision, that you've done some repair work, and then knowing that they're going to be watching.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to just say, all right, this is what you choose, welcome you back with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
If they say that, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to watch. I'm going to see, are you now treating each other with love and respect, or are things still blowing up? Are you really bringing out the best in each other? And if you're not, then they're going to be sitting in the wings like, well, was that the right decision?
Mm-hmm. How does it differ with children? Does that same explanation apply well for children who have seen the explosion? They have watched the volatility of the relationship. How best do you advise couples to explain that they're staying together when children have seen the damage?
Children want parents who function well. That is the indicator of whether kids are going to do well in a situation. So they need the parents to stabilize the crisis and then make that situation safe for them, whether they stay together or not. As far as kids, I cannot tell you how many times a parent has told me, my kid has no idea. They have no idea this is going on. Affairs, substance abuse, financial problems.
Really?
So many times parents are absolutely certain that their kid has no idea. And I talk to the kid and the kid knows 50%.
I mean, yeah, right? Right? Huh. I'm glad you're saying that. I mean, the assumptions of kids not knowing, and sometimes these are crisis scenarios, right? Like just really difficult strains in a family. Kids know. They have a sense, and they may not know, to your point, the fullness of the financial challenges or the marital issues, but they know. They have a discernment, I think, that we don't give them enough credit for.
More than the partner filling in the gaps, kids will always fill in the gaps. And so if they know 50%, they have filled in the gaps with what makes sense for them developmentally. And so lots of kids will say, Mom and Dad are having these blow-ups. This is my fault.
Wow.
So you've got to be open enough with kids to give them enough information so that they are not creating stories in their head, but also developmentally appropriate, age appropriate to the situation. They don't need to know that one of their parents had an affair when they're young. They may need to know that Mom and Dad are going through a really tough time, and they will get through it, or they will figure it out, or they're going to be taken care of. But just to say this isn't happening, that's when kids are like, something is so bad that they can't tell me. So let me start imagining what is so terrible that they can't tell me.
This is so good, and I hope every listener really zooms in on this part. And what I'm taking away from this is if a parent believes that their kids know absolutely nothing about what's going on, maybe they should ask their kids, hey, what do you feel is happening in the household? I don't know, but I think the assumption that they don't know anything is super dangerous. And we might need to check to see if that assumption is actually real. I mean, that's what I'm taking away. And you would agree, Dr. Timko?
I do agree. I would start with just open-ended conversations. You don't have to lead them. You just want them to reveal what they know. So you gotta, you have a relationship with your kid. You gotta talk to them. The other thing is, I have 3 kids. Man, those kids are gonna talk.
They
Like
do.
if one of them knows something, they are going to share. So if you have a conversation with one of them, you kind of have to assume that they're going to reveal stuff to one another. You can try and guide that or put some boundaries around that, especially with the older kids saying, look, this isn't something your younger sibling can deal with yet. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, but I do need you to keep these pieces out of this. Certainly be supportive to your sibling, and you can try to do that. Or my kids were really close in age. My oldest and youngest were 3 years apart, and there were
Oh,
three
wow.
of them.
Very close.
So, you know, in my world, when something happened and I knew that they needed an explanation, I needed to tell all of them. There wasn't a way to kind of say, you're old enough for this and you're not. So, just being like, okay, let's talk about what's happening here.
Such good advice. Oh, such good advice. What are some lessons couples can take away from surviving an affair to strengthen their relationship going forward?
What a couple eventually learns is that their relationship is better because they had this crisis point. That they come face to face with who they are, what their marriage looks like, and who their partner is. And the couples who do the best are the ones that say, this is what honestly is here. This is what needs to be fixed. This is what we're keeping. And this has no place in our relationship. And they start having these very honest conversations. So hopefully they'll do the work so that they don't revert back to whatever politeness or whatever workarounds or avoidance or arguments they had that led to them not solving those problems. And they take that honesty with them to say, if we're not honest, things are going to happen and we're not going to be able to deal with it. It's this idea of if your partner is having thoughts, if they're contemplating something, if they're wrestling with something, is it better for you to know because then you can deal with it and handle it? Or is it better for them to hide it, deal with it themselves so that you're not uncomfortable? And really, most people will choose, all right, let's put the cards on the table and figure out how to solve this. Let's not set this aside and each person deal with their own stuff.
Yeah, let's do the work. That's back to the responsibility of the relationship. So one last question for you. If there's someone listening today who might be stuck in a painful situation and they are curious about where even to start, what would you want them to know? What would you tell them or share with them?
I put together a free mini course for the person who just learned that their partner had an affair. I think I always lose wording, but I think it's called My Partner Had an Affair, Now What? And it pulls together all of this. What should you do first? What's most important? What's the priority? It's a free mini course because this information should just be free and available. So my first advice would be pause, process what happened, try to get all the information, take good care of yourself, do what needs to be done, take care of your kids, take care of yourself, set some boundaries that keep you safe, and give yourself the grace and the space to not make a decision right away. That's going to be really hard for your partner who had an affair, but you have the right to say, I need to think about this. I need to be clear. I need to make sure that I'm making the best decision I can. And right now is not the time.
Such good advice. And Dr. Cheri, I wholeheartedly appreciate that you are making that kind of tool available to people who need it the most, especially when they feel their world is crashing down around them. There are resources out there. There are tools out there to help. And I appreciate you for opening that up for people who need it the most. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Timko, I appreciate you again for sharing your insights and giving us lots to think about when it comes to healing after an affair. These are tough conversations that so many people need, but rarely know where to start. And your guidance today was honest, practical, and full of hope. So I appreciate you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
To our listeners, if you're navigating this in your own life, I hope you feel seen, less alone, and maybe a little more equipped to take your next step. We'll drop links to Dr. Timko's resources in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. As always, thank you for tuning in to We Don't Talk About That. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another honest conversation. Until next time, keep leaning in, even when it's hard, because those are the conversations that really matter.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of We Don't Talk About That, supported by Grand Mental Health. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast and become part of our growing community of mental health advocates. Visit grandmh.com for more information.